From poor to rich, unexpected inheritance left by a great uncle gives me a chance to escape pregnant from my fiancé and best friend. They cheated on me with each other. Hey everyone, I never thought I'd be the one typing out my life drama on the internet, but here I am, grasping for any bit of advice or maybe just a place to vent. My name's Ayla, I'm 25, and I'm stuck in what feels like a terrible soap opera, only it's my real life. So here's the deal. I'm pregnant. And yes, under normal circumstances, it should have been a joyous announcement, especially since I'm engaged to what I thought was the love of my life, Owen. But life threw me a curveball, or rather, a series of fastballs right at my face. It all started last Thursday. Owen was in the shower, and his phone kept buzzing on the dresser. Normally, I'm not the snooping type, I swear, I'm not. But something about that day, the way the phone vibrated with urgency, made me pick it up. I wish I hadn't. What I saw flipped my world upside down. Messages, a whole thread of them, not to mention photos, yeah, those kind of photos, from Tessa. Tessa, who I've shared my deepest fears and biggest dreams with since we were in braces and pigtails. I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled as I read the explicit texts and saw the timestamps. This wasn't just a one-time mistake. It had been going on for over a year of lies, a year of betrayal, a year they played me for the fool. There I was, standing in the middle of his bedroom, feeling the walls closing in on me. I'm financially tethered to Owen. Ever since my parents passed away in a car crash 3 years ago, I've had no real family to turn to. Owen was my everything. He supported us while I've been trying to finish my degree. Leaving him meant pulling the rug out from under my own feet, especially now with a baby on the way. I slid the phone back just as he came back into the room, his hair wet, acting like the man I thought I knew. I faked a smile, one of those that you plaster on your face while inside you're screaming. I needed time to think, to plan. I couldn't let on that I knew. Not yet. So here I am, typing this out, sitting in what used to be my sanctuary, now just a room filled with secrets and lies. How do you confront the person you love when they've shattered your trust into a million pieces? How do you face your best friend who's been stabbing you in the back while hugging you tight? I'm stuck, and I'm scared. But I guess I've got to figure out something. Because I can't live like this. Not with a clear conscience, and definitely not with a baby on the way who deserves the world. As the days slipped by, my mind spun endlessly around the same loop of betrayal, shock, and helplessness. I was living in a fog of disbelief, mechanically going through the motions of everyday life with Owen. Each look, each touch from him now felt like a lie. My heart raced with anxiety, and I found myself glancing over at him, wondering how I could have missed the signs. Every "I love you," he said now sounded hollow, poisoned by the reality of his actions. Each morning, I woke up to the nausea of early pregnancy, a constant reminder of the life growing inside me, a life tied forever to Owen. The joy I initially felt about our baby was now tainted with fear and uncertainty. How could I bring a child into this mess? My financial dependence on Owen mocked me every time I thought about leaving. With no family to turn to and no substantial income of my own, I felt trapped in a nightmarish reality. One afternoon, a knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I opened it to find a courier handing me an envelope. "Ayla Sutherland?" he asked. Nodding, I took the package, curious and slightly apprehensive. Inside was a letter from a law firm I didn't recognize. As I unfolded the letter, my eyes quickly absorbed the words, inheritance, distant relative, and urgent. My hands trembled as I read through the legal jargon to decipher that a distant relative, whom I barely remembered, had left me a substantial inheritance. The letter mentioned a Mr. Harold Green, my great-uncle on my mother's side, someone I remember meeting once as a child. According to the letter, Harold had passed away recently, and his will specified me as one of the beneficiaries. Why me? We hardly knew each other. What more, the inheritance was tied to several conditions and revelations about my family's past that Harold had meticulously documented and left with his solicitor. The timing felt surreal, almost like a lifeline thrown into the turbulent sea of my despair. But this unexpected news also unearthed a flurry of emotions and questions. Why had my parents never mentioned this relative? What secrets lay buried in my family's history that I was now on the brink of uncovering? As I sat there, the letter in my lap, I felt the first real spark of hope ignite within me. This money could mean freedom. It could be my escape from Owen and a chance to start anew. But it also meant delving into a past my parents had kept hidden from me. The weight of this new responsibility was daunting, yet it empowered me to think that maybe, just maybe, I could have a future where I wasn't bound by the mistakes of the man I thought I loved. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Owen's quiet breathing beside me. The inheritance was a beacon in the storm, but it was also a Pandora's box, waiting to be opened. Would the secrets of my family's past offer me liberation, or would they drag me further down into chaos? I knew one thing for sure. My life was about to change drastically, and I had to be ready to face whatever came out of that box. I made an appointment to meet with the solicitor handling my great-uncle Harold's estate. The old office was lined with books and smelled of leather and wood polish, a stark contrast to the sterile, modern spaces I was accustomed to. Mr. Foster, the solicitor, was a dignified older man with a kindly demeanor. He handed me a folder thick with documents and a smaller, sealed envelope. Your great-uncle Harold took great interest in your welfare, though he chose to remain a silent guardian, Mr. Foster explained as he adjusted his glasses. He was quite aware of your life's trials, particularly after the tragic passing of your parents. This revelation stunned me. Why would he choose to stay hidden? I asked, my curiosity piqued, but my heart sinking with a sense of betrayal. Ah, that involves a rather complicated family history, Mr. Foster replied, hesitating slightly before continuing. You see, there was a feud between Harold and your father over some moral disagreements and business decisions. It escalated to a point where communication ceased altogether. Unfortunately, pride and stubbornness can sever ties that should have held strong. The folder contained letters and diary entries from Harold, detailing not only his life, but also commenting on mine with a distant yet caring perspective. As I flipped through these pages, a narrative unfolded, one where I was a character discussed in the third person, a strange feeling indeed. The sealed envelope contained the will and a personal letter to me from Harold. His words were warm, but carried a weight of unspoken stories and regrets. He expressed his desire for me to use the inheritance wisely to secure my future, and hinted that the funds were derived from successful investments and some old family heirlooms he had managed to preserve. As I absorbed this information, Mr. Foster presented another shock. There is another matter, he said carefully. The will was initially contested by another family member. It seems Harold's decision to leave the bulk of his estate to you did not sit well with some. Who contested it? I asked, my interest deepening. That would be your second cousin, once removed, Clara. She argued that as Harold had no direct offspring, the estate should be divided more broadly among the family. However, your great-uncle was very explicit in his wishes, and all legal challenges have been resolved in your favor. Clara, I didn't even know I had such a relative. The existence of other family members, previously unknown to me, hinted at the vast disconnect between the branches of my family tree. It raised questions about what else was hidden in the shadows of our family's past. Returning home with the documents, I felt overwhelmed, but determined. I began poring over Harold's letters each evening, discovering the depth of the family discord. It seemed my father had been involved in some questionable business practices that Harold deeply disapproved of. This feud had led to a rift so severe that it had persisted even beyond my father's death. As I read more about my family's history, the inheritance began to feel heavier, loaded with the weight of past grievances and unresolved conflicts. Yet, it also presented a strange sense of connection to a family I never knew I had. Each secret uncovered felt like a piece of a puzzle being placed, revealing a larger picture of where I came from. But the financial independence that the inheritance offered was too significant to ignore. It provided an escape hatch from my current life, entangled with Owen's deceit. As I processed the information, a plan began to form in my mind. I knew I had to confront Owen and Tessa, but now I felt empowered to do so on my terms. With each passing day, as I prepared for the confrontation, I also braced myself to explore more of my family's dark past, unsure of what other secrets might emerge. Armed with newfound financial independence and unsettling revelations about my family, I felt a surge of strength coursing through me. I was no longer the vulnerable, trapped girl I had been just days before. I decided it was time to confront Owen and Tessa, to tear off the bandage and expose the wound beneath, hoping somehow it would start to heal in the open air. I texted Owen one morning, my fingers hesitating only a moment before sending the message. We need to talk about our future. Dinner tonight at our place? He agreed, unaware of the storm that was about to break. Next, I called Tessa. It took every ounce of my willpower to keep my voice steady as I invited her over, claiming that Owen and I wanted to share some important news. As the appointed time drew near, my stomach churned with a mix of dread and determination. I set the table for 3, each place setting a reminder of the betrayal that had been festering like a hidden wound. When they both arrived, the air thickened with tension, their smiles strained, as if they sensed the change in me. Dinner began with idle chatter, which I bore with a plastered smile, all the while my heart pounding against my chest. As the main course gave way to dessert, I decided it was time. I set down my fork, looked across the table at Owen, then at Tessa, and said, "I know about the affair." The shock was immediate. Owen's face drained of color, and Tessa dropped her fork with a clatter. "Ayla, Owen started, but I raised my hand to stop him. "Don't. I've seen the messages, the photos. You've been lying to me for over a year." My voice was calmer than I felt inside. "And you," I turned to Tessa, "were supposed to be my best friend." Tessa's eyes filled with tears, and her voice was a whisper when she spoke. "I'm so sorry, Ayla. I never meant to hurt you. She trailed off, unable to continue. But I wasn't finished. "I also know that you're pregnant, Tessa." The words hung heavily in the room, and this time, the tears that fell from her eyes were unchecked. Owen reached for her hand across the table, a gesture so tender yet so traitorous that it made my stomach turn. "I thought we were all friends," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. "But it seems some of our other friends knew and chose to hide it from me." The betrayal wasn't just from Owen and Tessa. It extended further, cutting deeper because of the collective deception. Owen finally found his voice, his tone defensive. "Ayla, it just happened. We didn't plan for any of this. I love you, but I have feelings for Tessa too. I was going to tell you, I just didn't know how." "Save it," I snapped, my patience worn thin. "I've heard enough lies to last a lifetime." Standing up, I felt the full height of my resolve. "I'm done here. I deserve better than this, and so does my child." The room was heavy with silence as I left them there, my heart pounding, but my head held high. The next few days were a blur of action. I contacted a lawyer to begin untangling my life from Owen's, ensuring my financial and parental rights were protected. The inheritance from Harold wasn't just a lifeline, it was a catalyst that allowed me to reclaim my life. I felt the weight of my family's complicated past, but it also gave me the means to start anew, free from dependence and deceit. This confrontation was not just an end, but a beginning. As I stepped into my new life, I knew there would be challenges ahead, especially as a single mother. But I also knew I had the strength and resources to face them head-on. No longer shackled by betrayal, I was finally free to build a future on my own terms. After the confrontation, I retreated to the small guest bedroom, which had already been stripped of personal touches. I couldn't stomach the idea of sleeping in the bed I'd shared with Owen for years. My mind reeled from the events that had unfolded, but an odd sense of clarity settled over me. The truth had finally been dragged out into the light, and there was no going back. The next morning, I was up early, filling my suitcase with essentials and bundling my life into bags. I called a locksmith to change the locks, locking Owen and Tessa out of the house as a first step. When I saw the locksmith's van pull up, it felt like a door was finally closing on the old me. Owen arrived later that afternoon, and his knock on the door was relentless. I didn't bother answering. Eventually, his shouts turned into pleading, but his words fell on deaf ears. I stayed away from the windows until I saw him walk away, his head low and his steps heavy. While it hurt to see him like that, I couldn't let pity sway me. I wasn't interested in rehashing old wounds or trying to find solace in broken promises. I had to move forward. With the locks changed, I set up a meeting with a lawyer the next day. We had to ensure that my financial position was protected. The inheritance would provide security for my future, but I needed to know how best to safeguard it, especially as Owen and Tessa might attempt to stake their claim or manipulate me emotionally. The lawyer, Ms. Reynolds, greeted me with a firm handshake. Her eyes were sharp and calculating. I knew right away that she was the right person to help me navigate this tangled web. "First, let's solidify your claim on the inheritance," she said, as we went over my documents, including Harold's will. "We'll make sure there's no loophole for anyone to contest this, especially since the initial dispute was resolved." Her words reassured me, and within a week, Ms. Reynolds had the inheritance securely transferred to my name, shielding it from any unwanted interference. I was now the rightful owner of a substantial estate that included several properties and significant financial assets. But securing the inheritance was only part of the battle. Owen's betrayal had left emotional scars that would take time to heal. So, I reached out to an old acquaintance who worked in real estate and arranged to sell the house. I couldn't stand living in the place where Owen and Tessa had built their secret life together behind my back. As I sorted through the last remnants of my life with Owen, I stumbled upon our photo album. Flipping through it, I saw smiles that now seemed false, memories of happiness tainted by deception. In that moment, I realized the journey ahead would be difficult, but the burden of staying would have been far heavier. I rented a small, modest apartment on the other side of town and moved there while I prepared for the birth of my baby. Each day was a mix of nervous excitement and fear as I read parenting books and visited my doctor for regular checkups. Ms. Reynolds guided me through filing for custody and establishing child support, ensuring Owen couldn't avoid his responsibilities. Soon after moving into my new apartment, Owen showed up unannounced. He looked worn and disheveled, a far cry from the man who once carried an air of confidence and charm. "Ayla, can we talk?" he pleaded, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "We have nothing to discuss," I said firmly, refusing to meet his gaze. "I'm moving forward, and I suggest you do the same." "But the baby is mine," I interrupted. "I'll handle the legal paperwork, but there's nothing more to talk about." He tried to argue, but my resolve was unwavering. He eventually walked away, defeated and unable to sway me. In the following weeks, Tessa reached out as well. She sent a letter, full of apologies and pleas for forgiveness. It was filled with emotion, and she wrote about how she never meant for any of this to happen. But I didn't respond. She had already shown me what she valued most, and it wasn't my friendship. As I continued with my pregnancy, I focused on building a new life around my newfound financial freedom. I redecorated the apartment, turning a spare bedroom into a nursery, painting the walls a soft pastel green. Each day, I tried to fill my life with positivity, nurturing the small sprout of hope that was beginning to grow. Legal matters went smoothly, thanks to Ms. Reynolds. She finalized the inheritance claim and secured my custody rights. The baby would be mine, and I would provide a safe and loving environment, far removed from the drama that had shattered my old life. Despite the uncertainty and emotional scars, I was determined to stay strong. I no longer depended on Owen for my sense of worth or security. Instead, I relied on the legacy of my great-uncle Harold, a legacy that carried with it the weight of the past, but also the potential of a brighter future. I knew the road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in a long time, I felt free to forge my own path and give my child the love and stability that I never fully had. The pain would fade, the scars would heal, and with each passing day, I could feel the pieces of my new life coming together. In the quiet of my new home, with the morning sun spilling through the curtains, I often found myself reflecting on the tumultuous journey that had brought me here. The walls, freshly painted in hues of cream and soft blues, echoed with the promise of new beginnings and whispered secrets of peace. This was my sanctuary, a place where the past could not reach me, unless I allowed it entrance through the corridors of my memory. As I arranged the last of my books on the shelf, a knock on the door startled me. It was a delivery, a crib I had ordered. As I signed for it, the reality of my impending motherhood hit me anew. Soon, I would be responsible for a tiny, vulnerable life. The excitement was tinged with fear. Could I do this alone? The sting of betrayal from Owen and Tessa lingered, a bitter aftertaste that sometimes overshadowed the sweetness of my newfound freedom. Owen had tried to reconnect several times, sending messages and letters, expressing his regret and a desire to be involved in our child's life. He claimed that the affair with Tessa had ended, that it was a mistake he would regret for the rest of his life. But the wound was too deep, and his words too late. I had decided to allow him supervised visits once the baby was born, a concession I made not for him, but for my child, who deserved to know their father, regardless of his failings. Tessa's fate took a different turn. She had moved away shortly after everything came to light, the scandal too much for her to face. I heard through mutual friends that she had the baby, a little girl, and was trying to put her life back together in another city. Despite the betrayal, I occasionally found myself hoping that she found some measure of peace, that she learned from the pain we all suffered and would never cause such hurt to another soul. Sometimes late at night, I would sit in the rocking chair in the nursery, running my hands over the smooth, cool wood, and allow myself to feel everything. The sadness for what had been lost, the anger at Owen and Tessa for their deception, and the overwhelming love for the child who had not yet taken their first breath but had already changed my world. I worried about the future, about raising a child on my own. Would I be enough for them? Could I provide the love of two parents, fill the spaces that were meant to be occupied by another? These thoughts haunted my quieter moments, but they also steeled my resolve. My child would never doubt their worth, never feel unloved or unwanted. As I neared my due date, I organized my home. Each item I placed a silent vow to my future. Books to foster a love of learning, toys that would encourage creativity, pictures that spoke of a world waiting to be explored. I was building a life from the ruins of my past relationships, a life where love and laughter were the cornerstones. As I moved through my home, touching the soft blankets and arranging the tiny clothes, I realized that while the betrayal had broken me in ways I had never imagined, it had also rebuilt me stronger, more resilient. I was a mother, a survivor, and a beacon of hope for my child. I was alone, yes, but I was not lonely. My heart, once fractured, was filling with new purpose, new joys. And in this new home, with its light and space and promise, I found not just a house, but a home. A place where my child and I would write our story, one day at a time, together.